In this video, we're going to explore a tool called a pedigree. And we're going to use a pedigree in order to track conditions as they are passed on from generation to generation within a family or between families. As per usual, remember the terms that we've studied throughout the unit, character traits, and you might want to review how to do monohybrid crosses, dihybrid crosses, and review all the non-Mendelian forms of inheritance as well, like codominance, incomplete dominance with multiple alleles, so on and so forth, because it will make the analysis of pedigrees much easier for you. So this here is a pedigree, and a pedigree, you can think of it kind of like a family tree that we use in genetics. And so you track the transmission of a characteristic from generation to generation within a family. Usually some symbols that you want to become familiar with are the shapes. We'll start off with that. So if you have a square, that means you have a male. And if you have a circle, that means you have a female. Now you'll notice there's different colors. That's the next area. So you might have non-shaded or just white, or shaded or colored in black. The black means that the individual has the condition that you are studying. That could be a disease, it could be just a characteristic. It could be, let's say you're studying tongue rolling, that's the condition. So this person can roll her tongue. This person cannot roll his tongue. And so anyone who's colored in has the condition that you're studying. If two people are connected by a horizontal line, much like you see over here, that means mating. And you can show that this mating resulted in kids. And so the kids are connected to the parents by a vertical line, and if there's more than one kid, those kids are connected by horizontal hanging lines just above. So this couple over here, this female had children with this male. Specifically, they had 3 children, one boy here, one girl here, and one boy over here. This girl is not part of those children. This girl is someone who mated with the boy over here. And then they started their own family, and they had, as you can see, 2 girls. And this girl mated with a boy over here from a different family, and they started their own family, and they had 4 children, 3 boys and 1 girl. 1 boy affected by the condition you're studying, 1 girl affected by the condition you're studying. Those are the majority of the symbols that we're going to see, but as you can see, there are other symbols here. For example, you can see identical twins are represented over here, and non-identical twins are represented in this symbol format over here. And you're going to learn more and more symbols as you do more and more problems throughout the course. So I'm going to go over to this pedigree over here to show you how we refer to individuals within a pedigree. And then we're going to take a look at what conclusions and what we can say about the individuals in this pedigree. So right now this is a pedigree chart for freckles, for the condition of freckles. And you know that I'm telling you in this slide that freckles are dominant to non-freckles, to no freckles. So let's just say big F is freckles and little f is not freckles. So if you take a look at the individuals, you have several generations shown here. The generations are denoted by these usually Roman numerals. So here we can see generation 1, generation 2, generation 3. And so rather than saying the circle at the very top, what I could say is individual from generation 1, 1. So I know this is generation 1, individual 1. If I want to refer to the square over here, I could say generation 1, individual 2. Likewise, in generation 2, if I want to refer to, let's say, this circle over here, the female that married this male number 5 here, I could say generation 2, individual 4. And that's how I refer to individuals within a pedigree, rather than having to point at them or to describe them in terms of location. So I'm going to go through this pedigree, and we're going to figure out the genotypes of the individuals in the pedigree based on our knowledge of the fact that freckles is dominant to no freckles. So first and foremost, the easiest ones to identify are the ones with no freckles, because that's recessive. The only way to be no freckles is to have 2 recessive alleles. So if we go through all the individuals 1, 2, so this individual is little f, these individuals here are a little f, little f, little f, little f, little f over here, little f over here, little f over here. Now, the tricky part is figuring out what is the genotype of the individuals that have freckles. Because as you know, someone who has freckles can be big F, little f, or big F, big F. And so this is where you test what's called a hypothesis. You make an educated guess. So let's say for individual 1, 1, you guess that individual was big F, big F. So you guess that she's big F, big F. Well, do a Punnett square. Do a Punnett square between big F, and the father, individual 1, 2. So if you have big F, and little f, I'm not going to do the entire Punnett square, but you should know that all the individuals are going to be big F, little f. That means all the kids should have freckles. All the kids would be big F, little f. That's what that would mean. It would mean that it would be impossible for this offspring to have kids, for this couple to have kids without freckles. But as you can see in generation 2, they did have kids without freckles. So what that means is that this individual, 1, 1 over here, had to be heterozygous for the condition. So we were able to disprove big F, and support big F, little f for individual 1, 1. You can do the same for all the other individuals in this pedigree. Let's go take a look at individual 2, 4. Individual 2, 4 could once again be big F, or big F, little f. Now, let's take a look at the offspring. There are offspring without freckles. What that means is that we know individual 4 has to have a little f in her genotype, in order to get kids without freckles. So right away, we can support the idea that we have big F, little f over here instead of big F, big F. Now, if you did a Punnett square with big F, little f, and little f, which is individual 2, 5, you would see that you have big F, little f, big F, little f, and little f, little f, little f, little f. And so that would solve your problem for individual 3, 3. That individual, you would think, well, it could be big F, or big F, little f, but based on that individual's parents, individual 3, 3 can't be big F, because we just figured out that individual 2, 4 is big F, little f, and his father is little f over here. So the only option for individual 3, 3 is big F, little f. Now, what that leaves us with is this individual over here, 2, 3. Same logic that we used for individual 3, 3, this individual has to be big F, little f. So the idea is you figure out a little bit at a time. You figure out the most obvious things, then you figure out the things that you kind of know, do tests to figure it out for sure, and then go through the things that you don't know too much and try to find more evidence in order to support your hypotheses and guesses. And that's essentially how a pedigree chart is done, how a pedigree chart is analyzed. There are people called genetics counselors who would maybe use a pedigree chart or help to create a pedigree chart for couples that are planning to have children, or for individuals that maybe know there's certain diseases in their family and they want to see if they have a chance of getting that disease. So this is a very, very common tool that's used in order to do that genetic analysis of conditions being passed along from one family to, from one individual to another within families. We'll do a few more practice problems together, to see what type of problems you might see and to see other terms that are involved in pedigree analyses. So we've already done all this over here. We did some strategies to figure out what the genotypes are for these individuals with freckles and no freckles. What I would recommend that you do is you figure out, you try this again yourself to see if you determine the same conclusions that we did. A few other things I want to point out very quickly in terms of how you can describe relationships between individuals. So let's say we were looking at this individual here, 2-1, and I ask you how 1-1 is related. I would expect you to be able to tell me that 1-1 is the mother, and let's say 1-2 is the father. If we're comparing 2-1 and 2-2, I'd want you to be able to tell me that they are siblings, they're sisters, or maybe 2-1 and 2-3, well, they're brother and sister. Now let's say I circled 3-1, and I asked you how are individuals 1-1 and 1-2 related. Well, I would expect you to be able to tell me that they're not the parents of 3-1, but the grandparents of 3-1. So you should have some general idea of how to establish relationships between individuals. If you're not sure of family structure, it's always good to read up on that. It's always good to practice by looking at the examples that are given in your textbook and in the figures, as I do go over those terms of family structure in our society. So one common type of problem that you'll see in pedigree analysis is the idea of modes of inheritance, meaning how was a gene passed on? And there's 6 main modes of inheritance that you're going to see that are possible for pedigrees or for passing on genes. There's autosomal dominant, meaning that the gene is on an autosome, something other than a sex chromosome, and it's dominant. So you might have it on a chromosome, let's say number 1, and it's one of the big letters. It's a dominant condition. You might have autosomal recessive, so it could be on autosome number 1 and it's a little f, so you need 2 of those in order to have the condition. Another mode is sex-linked, so it could be X-linked dominant, it could be on the X chromosome and be dominant, or it could be X-linked recessive, meaning you need 2 of them in order to have the condition. Here you'll need 1 to have the condition, the other X could be an X little r and X big R. You could also have sex-linked Y-linked, meaning the condition is on the Y chromosome. And if it's on the Y chromosome, you know that it's only the father that can pass that on. And only boys will have that condition because only boys will have the Y chromosome. And then the last mode of inheritance that you're going to see is the maternal, which is from mitochondrial DNA. And what that means is that the mother will pass that on because the mother is responsible for the majority of the mitochondrial DNA that the child inherits. So the idea is that you should be able to figure out, looking at a pedigree, what is the most likely form of inheritance or mode of inheritance that is responsible for passing on the genes of a particular character. So you should look at it and be able to spot, is it autosomal dominant, autosomal recessive, sex-linked, X-linked dominant, X-linked recessive, Y-linked, or maternal, using certain patterns that we're going to study throughout this PowerPoint. So I've included some tips and tricks for what you can do to figure out if your gene is the mode of inheritance. So if it's autosomal, sex-linked, if it's dominant, recessive, if it's Y-linked or maternal. And it's important that you read through these slides and maybe have these tip slides available with you as you go through the problems for pedigrees. So usually you want to figure out first if your condition is autosomal, sex-linked, or mitochondrial. And if the disease is autosomal, you won't notice any abnormal patterns between males and females. There's usually roughly an equal amount of males and females that have the disease. It doesn't have to be exactly the same. It could be 3, 4, but there's no obvious pattern of differences between the sexes. If there was an obvious pattern of differences between the sexes, then that means your disease is most likely sex-linked. Like, for example, if you saw that a lot of males had the disorder and very few females, then it's probably sex-linked of some sort. If it was only males, then you could probably guess that it's Y-linked. So only the males were affected, then you know it's a special case called Y-linked. If you notice a condition where for some reason kids only get it when the mother has it, then you know that it's in the mitochondria, and as a result it's going to be a form of mitochondrial inheritance or maternal inheritance. To determine if something is recessive versus dominant, there's a few tips and tricks that you can use. A good trick for seeing if something is recessive is oftentimes parents that don't have the condition might have kids that do have the condition. So that means that they were both. That means they both were hiding the condition in them as a recessive allele as opposed to a dominant one. And those are all different tips and tricks that you can use to figure out the different categories. So it depends on the situation. You want to see what's easier for you to figure out first. Oftentimes it's easier to figure out if it's autosomal, sex-linked, or mitochondrial. Once you have that, you can go and take a look if it's recessive or dominant, and you can always do little test Punnett squares on the sides to support or refute your hypotheses to see what's possible and what's not possible. So again, here I've included a few other tips. So once you've figured out if it's maybe sex-linked, you want to figure out is it dominant or recessive. If it's dominant, usually you'll see more females are affected than the males. And again, if it's Y-linked, you're going to see that you only have males affected. And then there's certain conditions that you can take a look at with the sex-linked recessive. So for example, if a mother's affected but the father's not affected and only the son seems to get the disorder, then the disease is most likely going to be a sex-linked recessive disease. So just take a look at all the patterns. Really the best way to do this is, yes, looking at these tips and tricks, but also practicing to spot the patterns and becoming aware of them. I can do as many of these as you want me to, but at the end of the day, it's going to be you that has to do them in order to really spot the patterns yourself. So you can see a pedigree over here, and maybe you've already started to spot a pattern in this pedigree. We're going to go through a few different sample problems to see what patterns we can notice. So here we're going to start off with a condition called Marfan syndrome. You can see it's a genetic disorder that affects the body's connective tissue. When the dominant allele is expressed, an individual will have Marfan syndrome. People with no defect in the Marfan allele are homozygous recessive. Individuals with the syndrome are typically very tall with disproportionately long limbs and fingers and sometimes have problems with their hearts and eyes. Use a pedigree chart to determine the genotypes of all individuals if possible. So again, before you attempt to spot any patterns, you need to be able to assign genotypes and understand phenotypes in a pedigree. If you can't do that, then you won't be in a position to find the pattern yourself. Here we told you already that it is a dominant disorder. So I can go through this and try to write down genotypes. Individuals that don't have it, we know for sure they're going to be homozygous recessive, so that's very straightforward. We can write that out over here. Individuals that do have it, we know they're going to be big M something, big M something. And we can go and take a look if we can maybe narrow it down to big M or big M little m. So let's take a look at individual 1, 1. If you look at individual 1, 1, he made it with an individual that is little m. And you'll notice that they have kids that have little m. The only way for those kids to have little m is if the father had a little m as well. If you did a Punnett square and you mistakenly said that the father was big M, you would notice that all the kids would be big M, little m, and they would all have the condition. But that's not the case here. Some of the kids have little m, and that means they got it from the father. So that tells us that we have a big M, little m scenario for the father. For the female over here, we can also narrow that down. Since the father is big M, little m, and the mother is little m, there's no way for her to be big M, because the mother doesn't have a big M to give. Only the father does. So she's going to be one of these ones here, the big M, little m individual. The other kids are the little m individuals. So that's the first skill you need before you attempt anything more complicated. So let's take a look at this situation over here. We're going to figure out if we have a sex-linked, Y-linked, or autosomal condition as we do this problem. So we have an albinism problem here. So there's a defect in an enzyme involved in the production of melanin, which is a pigment that darkens the skin. These individuals have little or no pigment in their skin, hair, or eyes. The characteristic is governed by only 2 alleles. So there's only 2 alleles here, the normal allele and the albinism allele. Analyze the pedigree chart at the right to determine whether albinism is dominant or recessive allele. Then determine the genotypes for each individual. Use P and little p to represent the dominant and recessive alleles respectively. I'm just going to use big A and little a just so we can clearly tell them apart in terms of uppercase and lowercase letters. Sometimes in a question you can change the letters as long as it doesn't really affect the problem, in case you're worried about making a mistake with the uppercase versus lowercase version of it. So let's take a look to figure out if it's dominant or recessive. I'm going to look in each generation. I'm going to look at the parents and then compare their kids. So here we have parents that are not affected by albinism, and then here we have their kids. And you'll notice that if we look at their kids, we have only one of the kids that's affected by albinism, and the rest are not affected. But this is our key indicator over here. We have parents who are not affected, and then all of a sudden the condition appears. So what that means is that this was hidden in the parents, but it wasn't expressed in the parents. Since it was hidden and not expressed, that means that this albinism is going to be a recessive allele, because the parents did pass it on, but they did not express it themselves. They were hiding it. So that's a key giveaway to notice if something is recessive or dominant. If the parents don't have it, but their kids do, it was hiding in the parents, which means it's recessive. So right away, we were able to spot that this is a recessive pattern of inheritance. And we can go and we can start writing down little a in all the areas where the individual has been afflicted by the condition. And all the other areas, they're going to be big A something. All the other genotypes are going to be big A something, either big A or big A little a, until we can go and do a few tests to figure out if we can determine which one they are. Or if we can't, we'd have to write down that it's both possibilities. If we really can't determine what they are, if they're big A, little a, you can write it down as big A question mark, indicating that you know that it's one or the other. But you can take a look at generation 1, 1, and 1, 2 individuals. If you observe them carefully, they had a kid with little a. That means both of the parents must have had the little a allele in order to create that kid. So that tells us that these parents have to be big A, little a in order to have a child with little a. Let's go take a look at generation 1 individuals 3 and 4. They're in the same situation. They had a child who, they had two children actually who had the condition, but the point is that they both must have had little a in them, but they don't have the condition, so they are big A, little a. So we were able to confirm the support that they're big A, little a, not big A, big A. If you had said that one is big A, none of the kids would have had the condition, because all of the kids would have received the big A allele from one of the parents, and as a result been protected from the condition. Now where things get a bit trickier are in cases where we analyze the kids, but those kids don't have kids. So let's take a look. We have individual 3, 6 over here. If we look at their parents and we do a Punnett square, the parents, when they produce kids, they can have big A individuals, big A, little a, 50% chance of that, and then little a. Now, let's go analyze individual 6. If we analyze individual 2, 6, we know that that individual is going to be one of these 3 genotypes here. We can actually cross out the little a for that individual, because we know for sure that individual is not little a. Essentially, this individual has 1/3 of a chance of being big A, because it's out of 3. We know the individual is not little a. We can cancel that probability out. And they have 2/3 of a chance of being big A, little a. At this point, we can't really tell what this person is, because that person has not had kids. And so we can't tell what this individual is going to be. If we look at individual 2, 1, it's the same situation. So we don't know if this individual is big A, little a, or big A, big A. We just know there's a third of a chance big A, 2/3 of a chance big A, little a. But we're not too sure. Let's go see if we can figure out what individual 2,4 is. Individual 2,4 actually they have the condition. Sorry, I should have said 2,3. Individual 2,3. They don't. That person does not have the condition. I want to figure out if it's big A, little a, or big A, big A. Now we're in a situation where this individual had kids. She had 3 daughters, and none of them have the condition. Now if you assume that individual 2,3 is big A, little a, and she had a child with a little a individual, which she did, which is individual 2,4, the possible genotypes are big A, little a, big A, little a, little a, little a, and little a, little a. So roughly 50% of the kids should have should be healthy, and 50% should be unhealthy, meaning they have albinism. If you assume that the individual 2,3 is big A, well, all of the kids should be healthy. So they had 3 kids, and all the kids are healthy. Chances are this individual is big A at this point. It just seems that that's what's being supported by the pedigree. However, there's still a chance that this individual could be big A, little a, based on her parents. Maybe the next kid will have albinism. It's just right now the evidence points out to big A, but we can't 100% confirm that she's big A, but we can say that that's a strong evidence leading towards that. So if you were justifying this individual here, you could justify with a Punnett square that it seems like the individual is big A, not big A, little a. However, it's not 100% confirmed until there are more kids or there's further genetic testing or other information revealed from this individual. So again, that took some analyzing. It took studying the pedigree. It took looking at it for more than a few seconds to figure it out. That's what you need to do. You need to make sure you are persistent with this. If you simply look at it, can't figure it out, and ask somebody to give you the answer, you're never going to learn how to do this yourself. You need to actually start to spot these in your own way, as opposed to asking everyone else to do it for you. It's the only way you'll learn how to do these. They are difficult at first, but they will become easier and easier. It might take you 10 minutes to analyze your first few pedigrees, but then once you get the hang of it, you can do it within 30 seconds sometimes. It's just a matter of practicing. Just to show you a few other patterns that you can remove from this, to discount from this, if you were asked if this was Y-linked, you could take a look if the condition only affects boys. And the condition doesn't only affect boys, it affects girls too. So we know it's not Y-linked. We can remove that from our choices. It's not Y-linked. And you need to be able to, confirming modes of inheritance is important, but being able to refute modes of inheritance is just as important. So you can take them out of that choice selection process. Let's take a look if we can refute other ones. So remember, maternal inheritance means if the mother has the disease, she can pass it on to her kids. And that's the only time it'll be passed on, only if the mother has the disease. But here you can see a case where the father has it and he passes it on to his kids. Where the father has it, he does not pass it on to his kids. So we can't really disprove it here. In this situation over here, you can see the mother didn't have the condition, the father didn't have the condition, but they must have both worked together to give it to the daughter. So in that case there, we can see that it's not really the mother governing the condition, it's both of the parents governing the condition. So we know it's not really maternal inheritance that's going to be involved in this case over here. You can take a look to see if you can refute the X-linked hypothesis. So let's say it was X-linked recessive. Let's just assume that we're guessing that. I'm going to do a cross between individuals 2, 3, and 2, 4. So if it's X-linked, then what that means is the father is X little r y, And the mother could be a variety of things. She could be X big R, X little r, or X big R, X big R. So let's say she was X big R, X little r. The kids would end up being X big R, X little r, X little r, X little r, X big R Y, X big R Y. So if it was sex-linked and recessive, and the mother was this, then one of the daughters should have albinism, but we don't see that here. Let's take a look. If it was sex-linked and recessive, but the mother was X big R, X big R, we have X big R over here, X little r over here, X big R over here, X little r, and then for the boys, all X big R Y. They would all be healthy. So this cross doesn't really disprove or prove anything for us. It doesn't really disprove the idea of X-linked being wrong. So I can't really do anything from that cross. I mean, it seems that it's a possibility. I don't really see any discrepancies between male and females having the disease. It looks like it's close to equal amounts. I mean, you do have a few more females and not that many more. Let's go try another condition. So if it's recessive and it's X-linked, let's try to cross individuals 1, 3, and 1, 4. So we know that individual 1, 3 has to be X big R Y because he's healthy, and individual 4 has to be X big R, X little r because some of the kids have the disease. So let's take a look. So we have X big R, X big R, X big R, X little r. We have X big R, Y, and then X little r, Y. So if the disease was X-linked recessive, these would be the genotypes of our parents. You'll notice that every time a girl is produced, she's healthy. But as you can see from individual 2-5, the girl here is sick. If it was X-linked, she would have to be healthy. So what that would mean is that it's not X-linked. It's back to what we assumed initially, that it's autosomal. So in some cases you'll do a cross and you can't disprove anything. But in other cases you'll do a cross and you can disprove something. So right here I've disproved that it's X-linked. It's not X-linked, it's autosomal, recessive, and now we've confirmed the mode of inheritance. So here are some more sample problems that you can attempt. You can determine if the condition is going to be recessive or dominant. Here you're told that it's recessive, but take a look if it makes sense. You always want to see if there's any way you can prove that it's a recessive condition. You want to try to answer these sample problems that are included with the scenario. A lot of them are really just analysis problems to see if you understand what a pedigree is and how it's formatted. And again, here you can see more practice problems. You have to determine if the condition is a result of dominant or recessive. And you can probably spot it immediately now if you just pause the video, take a look at it, figure out if it's dominant or recessive, and then you can compare to my answer. So where I went to look is this here, generation 1, healthy parents, they have a sick kid. So right away I can spot that it's a recessive condition because they were hiding it within them. Same idea here, healthy parents and kid that's sick. So that means that they were holding this condition, they were hiding this condition within them. So immediately I could tell that this is a recessive condition. And anybody who's shaded in would have the little a, little a. I know it's not Y-linked, and you can see because girls have the condition too, so I can cross that out. And maybe, let's take a look if we can see anything else. So let's go figure out if it's sex-linked or autosomal. So I'm going to start off with these parents here. I'll assume it's sex-linked. If I assume it's sex linked and I do a cross, the father has to be X big R Y, and the mother has to be X big R X little r. The reason that she has to be X big R X little r is because they have some kids that are sick. But you'll notice that it's really impossible for the girl to be sick if the father is X big R, because any girl produced will be X big R or X big R X little r. And then any boy that produced is going to be either healthy or sick. So boys can't disprove it, but the girl here has disproven it for us. She's sick, but if it's sex linked, that girl can't be sick. So we know it's autosomal. So since it's autosomal, we can go along with our regular notation of little a and big A little a, and then figure out what the genotypes are. And in the next few slides, you'll see some examples of different conditions and the patterns that you'll usually see for typical types of modes of inheritance. So here you can see an autosomal dominant condition. Another clue that you have an autosomal dominant condition, you won't always see this, but you might sometimes see this, is that if both parents are affected by the disease, if it was recessive, if they were little a, then all the kids would have to be little a, because that's all they have to pass on. But in this case, you'll notice that not all the kids are little a. Some of the kids are sick and some are not. So that means they have a recessive allele in them. So these parents here, they have a recessive allele hidden within them. So this condition is big A little a for these parents. And we can't tell what these kids are. If you do a cross between big A little a, we know they could be heterozygous or homozygous dominant. But this individual, since it's healthy, has to be little a. So we know that healthy individuals are little a in this case. And you can see all these kids would be little a. But again, this picture truly highlights that if a disease or a condition is dominant and both parents have it, but a kid does not have it, then that's an indication that it's going to be dominant. Over here, you could tell what this parent is. If you said this parent was big A, you would be incorrect, because a big A parent and little a parent cannot have a little a child. So you know that this is a big A, little a condition. This individual has a condition. So this individual got big A from the father, but little a from the mother. So we could conclude with certainty all the genotypes of the majority of the individuals except for these two here, because they did not have kids and we need further information for them. Here we can see an example of an autosomal recessive, and that the number one giveaway is this over here, parents without the condition and they have kids with the condition. So the opposite of that autosomal dominant. You can see that oftentimes the recessive may skip a generation. It doesn't have to, but it can skip a generation because it could be hidden within kids. You can also see another interesting thing is that usually when a condition is recessive, if both parents have the condition, then all the kids will have the disease. So you can see here that anything with the condition is little a. You can go and fill those in. Once all those are filled in, then it's very easy to fill in everything else. So if you take a look at the, let's start with individuals 5 and 6 over here. So we have individual 5 filled out. If individual 6 was big A, then that individual could not have a little a child. So we know that this individual has to be big A, little a. That tells us more information. The only way for individual 6 to be big A, little a is if the mother had a little a to donate to the child. Actually, no, that's not true. We can't even assume that yet either. So sometimes you might make a mistake during trial and error. So let's go back and see if there's anything else we can figure out. Let's go and take a look at these parents over here, 3 and 4. They had a child with little a. So that means that the father must have had a little a to donate. So we have big A, little a over here. And if the mother is little a, and this individual here is healthy, this individual has to have a big A from the father, a little a from the mother. This individual, same idea. Big A from the father, little a from the mother. These individuals over here, they're all healthy. They could be big A question mark. This one over here, I'm not too sure what this one is yet. This one over here, I can probably figure it out. If you said big A, you'd be wrong because they have a child with little a. So that means this individual must have a big A, little a big A, little a, in order to have a child with little a. If these parents are heterozygous, then you know that these kids can be big A question mark, but we don't know anything else about that. We don't know what else they are because they haven't had kids and we can't get any other information. In this cross here, you can figure out this individual must be big A from the father and little a from the mother, so we figured that out with certainty. And I believe that's all we can figure out with certainty. This individual could be big A, little a. It's possible. But they could also be big A. It seems that this individual is big A for now, because all the kids are healthy, at least for now. It could be luck of the draw. So the most likely event is this individual here is big A. But we're not 100% sure. We can figure out individual 7. I'm not sure why it took me this long to get to this conclusion, but this individual can't be big A because this father does not have big A to give. So this person has to be big A, little a. We're just not sure what this person is up here. It could be big A. It could be big A, little a. We need more kids to confirm or further testing. So the only ones we're not really sure about are individuals 15, individual 16, and individual 2. We just need further information. Here we can see some more practice problems. So if I were you, pause the video, work your way through it, see if you can figure it out, and then check my answers to see if you're on the right track. So for the figure 13, I can confidently say that this is going to be a recessive condition because you have healthy parents who have the child with the disease. That means the condition was hidden in them. For figure 14, I can say that this is a dominant condition. And here's why. If the condition was recessive, that means that individuals 1, 1, and 1, 2, if it was recessive, would be little a. And all their kids would have to have little a. But we know that their kids aren't little a. Or we know that their kids don't have the condition. That means all the kids should have the condition because that's what the parents have, and it's recessive. But the kids don't have that condition. Since the kids don't have the condition, we know that the condition is actually dominant. So if you said, are they big A, and big A, you'd be wrong, because that means that all the kids would have to have the dominant condition. They can't be big A, little a, and big A, because still, if you do a Punnett square, all the kids would still have to have the dominant condition. But the parents could be big A, little a, and if you do a Punnett square, they have a chance of having healthy kids that are little a. And over here, you can confidently say that you have big A, little a, as opposed to big A, because if you had big A, then this individual would have to be sick too. So you could spot that we have our big A, little a over here. And we can come up with our genotypes. So here too, we'd have big A, little a, because between little a, and big A, little a, we can't get big A. To have big A, both parents have to have the big A allele to give to the child. So you're thinking about this logically. It's almost like the Punnett square is now part of your brain. You can do this like 1 + 1 = 2. And then here you can see some more practice problems. This one involves widow's peak. So you should be able to figure out what the genotypes and phenotypes are for the individuals. Again, when we track a condition in the pedigrees, they don't necessarily have to be diseases. It's anything that you're talking about. So we're talking about widow's peak here. So the individuals that are colored in, they would have widow's peak, and the individuals that are not colored in, they would not have widow's peak. Here we can see a condition that's X-linked recessive, and I'm going to show you why it's X-linked recessive. First of all, let's take a look at why it's not Y-linked. If it was Y-linked, only boys would be affected, but we can see girls are affected over here. Now let's take a look why we can see it's recessive. So the reason we can see it's recessive, and the main point here, is that if you look at parents 3, 4, they don't have the disease, but they have a kid with the disease. So that means that it must be hidden within the parents, so it's a recessive condition. And now, why does this make sense for it to be X-linked? Well, let's take a look. If you did autosomal, you would find it would work out just fine. And you could maybe conclude it's autosomal, but there's a better explanation that this is an X-linked condition. And you can see that there's a big difference between the number of boys and girls that have it for every generation. If you look here, you can see that out of these kids, only the boys have the condition. And over here, out of these kids, for 3 and 4, it's a boy that has the condition again. So there's a lot more boys that seem to be getting the condition for every generation. I'm not really counting this as one of the kids, because it's not one of the kids of the individuals there. It's just a girl from another family that married in here. But it just seems more boys are having the condition. So let's go take a look. If this is X-linked recessive, so we'd have X little r, X little r. The father would have to be X big R, Y. If you do a Punnett square, X big R, Y, X little r, X little r, you'll notice the daughter is always going to be X big R, X little r, and the son will always be X little r, Y. So the son will always be sick, and the daughter will always be healthy, in the case of the cross between parent 1 and 2. Yes, you could do that with an autosomal if you assumed it was autosomal, but it doesn't explain the differences in the sexes being affected the way they are. You can see there are more boys affected in this generation of kids than girls. And what seems to be the better explanation, rather than just saying it's just random chance, is that it's a sex-linked condition. Same idea here. If the mother's healthy, and we assume it's sex-linked, this mother has to be X big R, X little r, based on the previous parents. This father's healthy, so he's going to be X big R, Y. If you do a Punnett square between these two individuals, X big R, Y, and X big R, X little r, let's see what happens. We get females that are healthy all the time, and that's supported there. We get one healthy male, but we also get unhealthy male. So the unhealthy male is over here. Now again, this could be explained by autosomal, but it just seems that because more males are getting it here, that it's better explained by the sex-linked recessive. So recessive is not the question here. We know it's recessive based on 3 and 4, but this is better explained by X-linked because of the evidence that we saw from this scenario over here. Here we can see an X-linked dominant condition, and if you carry it through, you can figure out what the genotypes for the individuals will be. So if it's an X-linked dominant condition, then you know the father has to be X little r, Y. The mother could be X big R, X little r, or X big R, X big R. So if she was X big R, X little r, let's see if that works out. X big R, X little r, cross with a father who's X little ry. We get X big R, X little r, X big ry, X little r, X little r, X little ry. And so we get a female that's sick, male that's sick, but we also get some healthies in there too. So the healthies, you know, if it's sex linked, have to be X little ry, and for girls, X little r, X little r. For boys, again, X little r, y, X little r, y. If the mother was X big R instead, then everyone would be healthy. So we know that the mother in this condition cannot be X big R. She has to be X big R, X little r. So we know X big R is out of the question. Based on this Punnett square, whenever you have a boy who's sick, well, it's easy to figure that out. They have the dominant condition, and the other one's a Y. For the female here, it seems like there's only one possibility for a sick one. If it's dominant, it's the X big R, X little r. For the male, it's pretty easy to figure out based on the fact that it's a dominant X link. It has to be X big R, Y. And then you can do a cross to figure out what the kids would be, the daughters. So the daughters, you know, they both have to have X's first of all. Now it's a matter of figuring out what R they have. And so we can take a look at this. The mother must have given her daughter a little r, so we know that, because the mother only has a little r to give. And the father can only give X big R, so the father will always make, in this case, the daughter sick. So one of the major giveaways that this is most likely sex-linked dominant is that when the father has the disease, the girls have the condition. So the father's passing on that condition to the girls. When the mother has a disease, she can pass it on to both, but the main point is here that we see a distribution that's a little weird in the kids here. We see more females affected than the males. In the previous one where it was X-linked recessive, we saw more of the males affected than the females, so it was the other way around. Here we see a clear pattern of Y-linked inheritance, so you can see that we have only the males that are affected. It's never the females that are affected, and that's because the females just have XX. Whenever you get the disease with the Y on it, then that's going to be passed on and the kid will have the condition, if it's a boy. If it's a girl, well, that won't happen unless there's, of course, any errors in crossing over, but it won't happen in this situation here. There's typically not much that you do with the genotypes of Y-linked inheritance except for putting a little symbol to show that this is the diseased one, because sometimes a boy outside the family might come in and not have the condition, and you want to indicate that it's not the diseased one. So an X little y, like an XY over here to show that that's not diseased, and these kids are not diseased either, because this individual did not have the Y and is not really part of that family to begin with. And you can go and put in the XX for the females. Just like that. So here's another sample problem where you can figure out if you have an X-linked recessive, a Y-linked, or a Y-linked condition. Now, you should pause the video and try it out yourself and try to logic your way through it to see if it's Y-linked or not. So what I would do is I would go take a look at the generation 1 parents and see their kids. They do have a kid that is affected by the disease, and it is a boy, but don't jump to the conclusion and say that it has to be Y-linked. If this boy has a disease and it's Y-linked, he must have got the disease from the father, who would also have the Y-linked disease, which means the father should be colored in, but the father is not colored in. So chances are that this disease is not a Y-linked condition, but most likely an X-linked condition. If it's X-linked recessive, the father would have to be X big R, Y, and the mother could be X little r, or X big R, X little r, because she doesn't have the disease. if you do a cross between these individuals, the daughter will always be healthy, and the son could be healthy or sick, depending on what X chromosome he was given. So if we have X big R, X little r for the mother, X big R, Y for the father, again, the daughter will always be healthy because we have X big R, X big R, X big R, X little r. But the son could be healthy or could be sick. And so here we're giving you a choice between X-linked recessive and Y-linked. We disproved Y-linked, so we know it's X-linked recessive. And then you can go in and figure out what your genotypes are for the different conditions. And so here, for example, we know it's going to be an X little r Y. These individuals we can go and figure out as well. Any boy that's healthy has to be X big RY. Based on this Punnett square, the girl, we don't know, it's X big R something, X big R, X, either little r or big R, 50% of each. If she had kids, we could maybe figure it out, but we can't here. Over here, all the kids are always healthy, so chances are this mother is X big R, X big R. If you had said she was X big R, X little r, let's see how that would have panned out. Let's see if we could disprove it. So let's do X big R, X little r, cross with X little r, Y, because our father's sick. We'd have a daughter that's healthy, X big R, X little r. We'd have a son that's healthy, X big R, Y. However, we would have a daughter that could be sick, and we could have a son that could be sick. So in either cases, this one is possible still. It's just based on having 4 kids and never having the condition, I would say that this one is the most likely, but this one is still possible, because if they had a 5th kid, they might end up with a kid that has the condition, and then that would disprove our X big R, X big R. So if you were to write an answer for number 5, I would say you can't 100% confirm it. You could say it's most likely this one here, but it could still be this one. You need more testing or other kids to figure it out. So here we have an interesting pattern of inheritance. It's a little different than what you're used to seeing. I want you to pay close attention. Here we have a mother and father. Father has a disease, no kids have it. And it seems to be fine for the rest of the generation. Here we have a mother and father. Mother has a disease, kids have it. Mother and father. Mother has a disease, kids have it. All the kids have it. Mother and father. Here we have siblings. They all go off and start their separate families. That the brother becomes a father. He has a disease, but none of his kids have it. The mother becomes the sister becomes a mother. She has a disease, and all her kids have it. So as you can see here, whenever the father has a disease, none of the kids have it. They're okay. They're good. But whenever the mother has a disease, all the kids have it. So that means that the mother's passing on the disease to all her kids, which means this is maternal or mitochondrial inheritance. So typically we don't really write down the genotypes for mitochondrial inheritance, but you can tell that this is mitochondrial inheritance from this, from all the evidence that we've pointed out. So one thing to remember is that in these pedigrees, sometimes many answers can be supported, but you need to look at what the more likely answer is. You need to be open-minded. Realize that yes, you can solve almost any problem with autosomal recessive or dominant, but sometimes sex-linked might be the better explanation, or Y-linked might be the better explanation, or X-linked recessive, X-linked dominant, or maybe mitochondrial inheritance might be the better explanation. So you need to make sure that you have an answer, and then you try some experimental Punnett squares to support or refute what your answer is, to see which makes the most sense at a probability level. Sometimes you might have one that's more likely, but you're not 100% sure, so you can say that and say that you need more testing or more kids in order to really support or refute an idea. So here you have more practice problems to attempt. It's best to try these yourself and then check answers afterwards. compare your answers with peers as well just to see that you're on the right track. So let's take a look at pedigree A over here. For pedigree A, could this trait be inherited as a simple autosomal recessive? I'd say yes, it's a possibility. It's possible, I mean, it's more than a possibility. If you take a look over here, the parents have don't have the condition, but the kid does, so that means it is a recessive condition. It could be autosomal. Chances are it's not dominant, so I would say it's not dominant in these cases. It's going to be a recessive condition. So anything where dominant is written down, I'm going to say no. Could it be X-linked recessive? Well, let's take a look. If it was X-linked recessive, the father would have to be X big R Y because he's healthy. The mother would have to be X big R X little r because she's healthy but has a sick kid. If it was dominant, if it was autosomal, would they both be big A little a because they have a sick kid? But let's take a look if it's possible for it to be sex linked. So here we'd have X big R, X big R. We'd have X big R Y. So far it looks like girl and boy healthy. X big R, X little r, so a healthy girl, but then X little R Y. So notice that the only thing that gets sick is the boy. It is possible to have a healthy boy based on this situation, and all your girls are always healthy. So yes, it is possible that this is an X-linked condition. It's really hard to really confirm autosomal versus X-linked at this point, just because there's not a lot of data there, but it could be one or the other that can be supported. So let's take a look at pedigree B. Could this be an autosomal recessive? I would say no, because if it was autosomal recessive, then all the kids should have the disease. But they don't all have the disease. Because if it was recessive, they'd have to be little a, little a, little a, little a, and all the kids should be that. So I would say it's not recessive, that this is a dominant condition. So anywhere it says recessive, I'm going to cancel that out and say no and no. So now we're kind of choosing between autosomal or X-linked. I wouldn't say Y-linked because girls can have the condition. So over here, let's take a look. So if it was simple autosomal, I wouldn't say they're big A because that means all the kids would have to have the disease. I would say it's big A little a for both of them. And you can have sick kids and healthy kids. That works. Let's see if it can be let's see if it can be sex-linked dominant. So if it's sex-linked dominant, the father would have to be X big R Y, and the mother would have to be X big R X little r. I should have been using A. I don't know why I changed letters. I didn't have to do that. But the point is that when I do the Punnett square, the daughter's sick here. The daughter's sick here. The son is sick over here, but the son is healthy over here. So the daughter is always sick no matter what. The son could be healthy or could be sick. So this could be a sex-linked condition as well. It could be sex-linked. It could also be autosomal. I wouldn't say there's enough evidence right now to support it. It seems like right now the sex-linked is the more likely possibility, because why would two girls be sick at this time every single time? It seems that it's a higher likelihood that it's sex-linked, but there's also a good case for autosomal. You might need more data. But again, a good answer would say it seems like the best response is sex-linked so far, but there's still chances that it's autosomal with other testing. So let's take a look at pedigree C over here. Is it recessive? Well, I would say yes. Chances are it's recessive because parents don't have it, but kids do. So it's some kind of recessive, but I would say no to the dominant. So could it be autosomal? Yes, it could be autosomal. If it's autosomal, then the parents are going to be big A, little a, because they have kids that are sick and kids that are healthy. Could it be X-linked recessive? Well, let's take a look. If it's X-linked recessive and the parents are healthy, then that means that the mother has to be X big R, X little r, because she has some unhealthy kids, and the father has to be X big R, Y. And let's go take a look. So the daughter would be X big R, X big R. She'd be healthy there. The daughter would be X big R. The son would be X big R over here, Y, so he'd be healthy there. The daughter here would be healthy as well, but the son here would be sick. So if you said that it's X-linked recessive, you would actually be wrong in this case, because if you take a look, anytime there's a daughter, anytime there's a daughter, she has to be healthy. There's no way to produce an unhealthy daughter here, and you have that over here. So in this case, it can't be an X-linked recessive. So we've disproven that. So chances are it's going to be an X-linked, an autosomal recessive. So you'll notice that most of the case, in all these cases here, we're not really proving by supporting, we're sort of proving by refuting everything else. That's not possible. And again, that's why I said that refuting is oftentimes more important than being able to support an answer, because anytime there's some other child that comes along or more testing, it might refute your initial idea. Let's take a look here at the pedigree D. So could the condition be recessive? It could be. You could have a big A, little a individual, the sick one, crossed with a big A, little a, and that could result in healthy kids. You could have a big A, healthy, big A, healthy, and then little a, unhealthy. That's a possibility. So yes, it could be a recessive condition. It could be autosomal recessive. Could it be dominant? Let's go take a look to see if it could be a dominant condition. I'm going to assume dominant autosomal right now. So if it was dominant autosomal, I would say that this parent is big A, little a, and then this parent is little a, and these healthy kids will be little a. So the opposite of what we saw earlier. And these kids would be big A, little a, big A, little a. So I could say yes, that it could be an autosomal dominant condition, which is a possibility. Let's go take a look at is it Y-linked? Probably not, because girls have the condition. Is it mitochondrial inheritance? Probably not, because the father had the condition and passed it on to his kids, so it wouldn't be mitochondrial inheritance. Let's take a look if it could be X-linked recessive. Let's see if we can disprove that. So if it's X-linked recessive, the father here would have to be X little r Y. The mother would have to be heterozygous, but she's healthy. So X big R, X little r. If that's the case, we'd have X big R, X little r, X little r, X little r. And then we'd have X big R, Y. And then X little r, Y. So what that would mean is that if it's recessive X-linked, then some of your boys could be sick, some of your boys could be healthy, some of your girls could be sick, but some of the girls could be healthy. It is a possibility, an unlikely one based on this situation. I would expect maybe a sick boy or expect maybe a healthy girl. It's a possibility, but I would say an unlikely one. Let's see if it could be X-linked dominant. So X-linked dominant, if it was X-linked dominant, what that would mean is the father would have to be X big R Y, and the mother would have to be X little r X little r. If that's the case, we have X big R Y, we have X little r over here. Do the cross, and you'll notice that every single time your daughter should be sick. And your sons should be healthy. Now, while the other modes of inheritance were possible, for kids to match this exact Punnett square would mean that this is probably the most likely one over here. So yes, these are all possibilities, but this just seems like the most likely situation because it's an exact match to the Punnett square. It's all the girls being affected and not the boys. I would say that this is a higher chance that this actually works out. So this would be a better possibility, than the other ones above, even though they are still possible. And I shouldn't say better, I should say more likely event. And then here you can see more practice problems that you can attempt and compare answers with your peers. It is a long video, but it's really meant to be a tutorial to walk you through problems for you to check your answer with. So you can take a look at the, here you're given the genotypes, and you have to go in and fill in the genotypes of the individuals based on how they're colored in. So there's not much you're figuring out. You're given this information ahead of time. Here you have to figure out if the condition is recessive or dominant, then figure out if it's sex-linked or autosomal. So pause the video, try it yourself, and then come back and take a look with me to see if you have the right answer. So I'm going to start off with recessive versus dominant. Right away I can see healthy parents, sick kids, recessive. So let me go take a look if it's sex-linked or autosomal now. So it seems to me like you have more males affected than females. I don't see many females being affected. Based on this idea, I'm starting to think that it is going to be a sex-linked condition. It just seems too unlikely that autosomal is the explanation for more males being affected. So let's just take a look to see if it works. If it is really a sex-linked recessive condition, what that means is that the father over here is X big R Y, and the mother has to be X big R because she's healthy, but she had a sick boy, X little r. So you can see that the daughters will always be healthy, and the sons, they could be healthy, but they could also be sick. So it seems like because the daughters are always healthy, but they produce sick sons, that seems to be the most likely event. Same situation over here. Same situation over here. And over here we have, let's just take a look, we have a father who's sick. So he's X little r y. And a mother who's healthy. So she could be X big R, X big R. And it seems like all the kids will be healthy in this case if the mother's healthy. It's really hard to disprove anything from that situation, but overall in all the other situations, because the boy is getting the condition more than the girls and it's recessive, it seems like this is going to be explained by a sex-linked condition as opposed to an autosomal linked condition. So you'll also have to be able to draw pedigrees, and so you can see a great example here. This is a scenario given to you and you're playing the genetics counselor. A man walks into your office, and the man has purple ears, and you ask him about his family history, and he tells you a bunch of stuff. So he says that the man's mother and one of his sisters had purple ears, but his father, his brother, and two other sisters had normal ears. So let's start drawing that out. So we'll draw out the man's mother, and we'll color her in with purple ears. We'll draw the man's father. He's not colored in because he's not affected. He said that he has 3 sisters total. His sister, his brother, and 2 of his sisters. 3 sisters total. So let's draw the 3 sisters in. He has a brother. And we'll draw him just off to the end over here. We'll color him in. He said everyone in his family is normal except for him and his mother and one of his sisters. So we'll just color this sister in here. He says that he has a normal eared wife, so we'll draw her over here. They have 7 kids, 4 boys and 3 girls, so we'll draw them in. So 4 boys. And then 3 girls. And we know that the 2 girls and 2 boys have purple ears. So 2 boys, 2 girls, 2 boys. Now, based on this pedigree, I wouldn't say that it's sex-linked because it seems like mother can pass on the condition to boys and girls, father can pass on the conditions to boys and girls. It seems like it affects boys and girls roughly equally, almost a 50-50 chance. So I wouldn't say it's a sex-linked condition. I would say it's probably autosomal. In terms of whether it's autosomal recessive or dominant, it's a bit trickier here. Not really tricky, but you'll notice that you could say it's a recessive disorder. You could say this person's little a, big A, little a, and that they always have, that anybody who has a disease is little a. Anyone who doesn't is going to be big A, little a. So you could say that. That's a possibility. Now, the more likely situation is, and usually this is a giveaway, when you notice that when you have sick kids and at least one of the parents was sick every single time you have that situation, that usually means it's an autosomal condition that's dominant. And the other thing is, you'll notice that the condition didn't seem to skip any generations at all. So because the condition didn't seem to skip any generations, even though it could be recessive, the fact that it didn't skip generations probably means that it is a dominant condition, because it did not skip generations. So you could support both recessive and dominant. Dominant would be the better approach in this case, just because it didn't skip a generation in this situation here. So if we say it's dominant, then you can go around and write in the genotypes, big A, little a, and then keep filling it in as you go. And you could figure out the genotypes based on little Punnett squares and hypotheses that you do throughout. Here you can see there are more practice problems that you can attempt. So the textbook readings and tutorials cover these pages over here. I put a link with some more tips and tricks on how to solve these pedigree problems. And then there's some more practice problems and videos that you can watch at the links over here. And I'll include more videos on the on D2L and the course website as well.